Today I will be going over potholes or education with funding here in Philadelphia. So the current state of Philadelphia funding. The mayor has current pillars that she's investing in with this fiscal year 2025, which is things like housing, um, different initiatives, safety, um, with some examples to the right, with 1 billion being allocated for science centers, police body cams, and wellness ecosystems, where which may look different in different communities, and this 2 billion that is shown to the right is of a 6.8 billion budget uh, that the mayor is definitely targeting for uh, I think narrowing down on specific sectors that she's trying to invest in. Looking toward the next year, to the right, here's a more like I guess detailed list of per like initiatives and things that are going to be more invested in. As we can see, there's going to be uh, 500 million designated for airport investments. I know that was a big thing being talked about in the city, and I saw a bunch of videos on it, and then there's things like um, the 45 million contribute in contributions to enhance special events. I know also they were talking about just the FIFA World Cup that's happening in Philly next year. So things like that they're getting ready for. Um, just going into the pros and cons of potholes. Um, in Philly, here's two quotes that I got from an article from today, Philadelphia Today. Just talks about the reports of potholes. You see 6,000 from like not even a you know um, I mean it's from a year, but I think that's still crazy. Just with the recent or like this is pretty new. And also the time span of like new potholes and are already recorded potholes, but also as we see with the pros, there's 4,000 resolved cases. So it's getting there. The cities trying to limit these things, and then as we can see with education, as we look at it, uh, you know, it seems to be talked about well in mainstream media. As I was looking through um, just different articles online about Philadelphia and education. Um, as we can see with Philly Voice, it talks about um, a jump, a 1.5% jump in total enrollment throughout schools, uh, which compared was below a decade ago, which is surprising to me. But also, well, um, I don't know, 1.5%, give or take, um, is is all right. Thoughts on both? I think just with education, it's definitely the backbone for youth. In the inner cities. So funding could definitely be more well revised and spent on resources and other things centered around elementary, middle, high school, um, high schools. When talking about giving back, and then also potholes. Many of the people around me have been talking about just what they see, and mainly drivers. They're aggravated at potholes and the streets just being messed up. Um, but yeah, definitely with analyzing the data when talking about potholes, it's good to see some like an initiative being there as a placeholder. I mean, potholes may be looped into it, but when looking at it, I would like it to be more like specified with how they're dealing with the pothole issue. I know they're doing um, efforts on in like clip program to like upgrade highways and all with like making that better. As far as education, um, the funding is there, but also it needs to be allocated in a better way. Um, just with getting resources and all like streamlined to like teachers and students, so it can be an improvement in that space. Um, and then yeah, here's a quote from CBS News that I got. Um, that echoes it. Talks about the expressways and highways, being improved, which you know uh, can bleed into these communities. Um, so hopefully, that's something. Whereas in this upcoming year, 2026, they look at it as a whole and be like, okay, so we're done or just starting on highways. Let's get these communities straight. And then as far as education, here's a quote from Billy Penn at Y. Talks about lack of resources, fundings in schools. Like I said, it definitely has to be, um, you know, uh, streamlined. Big on the just having a sustainable way to um, for schools to improve, because then schools are, definitely at risk of closing, and who will want that, who will want like, ultimately, when schools close, we see what happens, schools turn into, you know, abandoned buildings or just, get turned into new apartments. So it's and it needs to be, um, just pet in the right places, instead of, I mean, I get the whole like school real estate tax that's being upcapped, but it still needs to be more funding to like essential things. So that is my presentation on education and potholes and funding of Philadelphia in this and in, next year.